Hi there, this is Joe from Signagelive speaking, and in this video I'm going to talk to you all about Screen Takeovers. Now, what is Screen Takeovers? Screen Takeovers is a new feature of Signagelive which allows your screens to function in sync for a set duration of time before falling back to their respective schedules. Now, to explain this a bit more, as you see here I have 3 screens next to me. Each of these screens is displaying its own unique schedule. When a screen takeover kicks in, what will happen is a piece of content or a playlist will kick in across each of these screens and they will function in sync for that duration of time or for the duration of that schedule. When that schedule comes to an end, these screens will then fall back to their respective schedules as you see here. So this can be 2 types of content. You can have a playlist that has a single asset per screen and they can then be in sync across the 3 players. Or in my case, what you're going to see is a single video that I've cut into 3 separate videos that will then span across the 3 screens to give the impression that it is one piece of content. This should be coming up soon. And as you can see, our takeover has kicked in this case. It's one piece of content stretched across the 3 screens, but actually it is 3 separate videos that I've chopped up to make them look a certain way. So what will happen now is when this finishes, the players will fall back to their respective schedules, as you see here. This will be a great feature for a restaurant, for example. Let's say you have 3 screens displaying unique food menus, and then at 12 o'clock, it becomes happy hour, for example. And then you want a happy hour ad to display across all 3 of these screens. That will happen. And then once your happy hour comes to an end, or the time that you've set that takeover to come to an end, the players will then fall back to their respective menus. So how do we set this up? In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how to do that and how this works as a whole. So here I am in my own Signagelive network, and I'm going to scroll down to the bottom here, and you'll see that I've got 3 screens here, which are these 3 screens that we are seeing behind us now. So if I click on one of these players, I'm just going to show you how this is set up. So if I go into the player here and go onto the content and screen on off tab, like so, you'll see that I've got my main schedule here, which is my playlist that I've published across each of these. And I'm actually using tagging in this particular case to separate what content appears on each player. So I have a single playlist, as you see here. I'm going to go into it now. And each of these players has a tag on them. So this is screen 1, screen 2, and screen 3. In this case, what I've done is I've added a tag for each of the assets in this one playlist, meaning that only the assets that have the particular tags will appear on each player. So in this case, you see this one I'm hovering over now, this will appear on screen 1, this second one here will appear on screen 2, and this third one will appear on screen 3. That tagging feature is something we've had in Signagelive for a long time now, and that actually comes into this quite a lot, and I'll talk about that in a second. But essentially what you need to understand is that is our default playlist that we have across each of these players. They each have their own piece of content. So the takeover. So now I'm back on the content and screen on off tab of one of these players here. And if I scroll to the bottom, what you'll see is we've got this new area called takeovers. And this is where our takeover schedules that are currently published to our player will appear. In this case, you can see I've got a single playlist. It's valid from the date that I published it, which was of course the 15th of April there. It's valid until indefinitely. And this happens every 90 seconds, as you can see here. So this is a takeover that kicks in every 90 seconds. And it's taking over the default content here, playing in sync for the duration of the takeover content, and then it's falling back to the schedules that you see on the screens by default. I'm going to go through the process of republishing this for you, just so you can see how this works. So let's pretend we've already got our default schedule here. We've already published that. And again, this could be 3 separate playlists if you wanted to as well. So I could have one playlist on each player as the default playlist. I'm not going to touch the default content here. I'm only going to touch the takeover content. But it's worth noting that if you did want 3 different playlists across each screen as the default content, this is still possible. You don't have to have this how I have this set up now. I've only set this up in such a way because it means that I can just publish one playlist and then I'm using tags to separate the content onto each of the players. In your case, you might want to go playlist 1, playlist 2, playlist 3, and then the takeover content will still need to be a single playlist that will then kick in and it will take over all of the screens. So how do we set this up? The first thing we need to do is set up a takeover group. And the takeover group is what houses all of the players that will have the takeover content published to them. So in our case, we're going to go to network up here, and then we're going to go to takeover groups. And here you can see I have my takeover group already created, which is this one here, Signagelive HQ. And if I click on that, I can see the properties for that. I can see the name. I can see what player types are in this takeover group. In my case, it's 3 Samsung Tizen players. And I can see the number of players that are in the group. Of course, we have 3. So To create a new group, what we would do is click the blue plus up here, click Takeover Group, and we would then call this a new Takeover group. And let's just go new Takeover, like so. Now that I've got my Takeover group created, I can now drag and drop any players that I want to live in that Takeover group into the folder. Once they're in the folder, it will look a lot like you see here. So we have Signagelive HQ, and we have our 3 players here. In this case, I'm not going to move these from their current group because I've already got this set up. So next, we need to publish to these players. And this is much the same how you would publish any other content, but we have added something new to the user interface. If I go to Content and Publish, and as you can see, I have the regular options here. I have when nothing else is scheduled between the chosen time and dates as a result of a trigger. And now we have as a takeover. And this is where we select the frequency at which our content is going to display. So in my case, I've got it to play every day. I can obviously do this on selected days if I wanted to. So let's say I only wanted this to happen once on Monday. I could do that by doing that. And then I select once a day. And that would mean at midnight on Monday, my takeover schedule would kick in. It would play for the duration of the schedule, and then it would go back to the default content. In my case, I'm going to go to play every day. So I want this to happen every day. I'm going to have this play all day, and then I can set a frequency at which this happens. In my case, much like I've got the schedule now, every 90 seconds, we have our red takeover content kicking in and taking over the content that you see on screen here now. We can do play between the selected times. So in this case, the repetition rule still applies, but it will only happen within a time window. So I could set this to be 8 a.m. and midnight. So between 8 a.m. and midnight, every 90 seconds, this content would kick in. I'm going to leave that as it is for now, and I'm now going to go on to step 2, which is what do you want to publish? You'll notice that layout is actually grayed out, and that's because at this time you can only publish playlists as takeovers. So we're going to go playlist. We're going to select my playlist, which is the playlist that I have here, which is my 3 assets, like so. And if I go to step 3, I now get to select my players by takeover group. And in my case, I'm going to select Signagelive HQ, press OK, and you'll see it immediately selects all 3 of the players that I want to publish this takeover to. And then it's as easy as hitting publish. And then what will happen is every time that frequency is hit on my player, it will then kick in the schedule as you see here. But how have I separated the content like so? This is one single playlist, remember. So what I've actually done is what I said earlier. I've used conditional tagging within Signagelive to separate my content to span it across the 3 screens. Now, of course, if I wanted one single asset to appear on each screen as the takeover, you could still do that. But in my case, I decided to separate it. And how do I do that? If I go to Content, Playlist, Create and Edit, I'm going to show you the playlist that was my takeover playlist. So if I open my playlists here, open up my takeover playlist, and as you can see, this is that one video that you're seeing span across the 3 screens. That's part 1, that's part 2, and that is part 3. And what I've done is I've separated that in an edit into 3 separate videos. And then I've used the tagging, like I said earlier, to separate each pieces of content to appear on each screen. Now, there is a prerequisite to this. You do need to make sure that the content is all of the same duration. So in this case, we've made sure that all of the videos are 10 seconds long. So when that takeover kicks in, it will happen for 10 seconds, and then the schedules will kick back in. If I double click on one of these assets, you can see the conditions. If I go over to the conditions tab here, you can see that this asset will only play on players that have this particular tag. So I've added that tag to player 1. Same with this one, which has got the 2nd tag. And this one has the 3rd tag. And that's everything I have to share with you today regarding screen takeovers. And with that, I'll bid you farewell, and I'll see you on the next one.